Gute Woche. Start off with already started with the first shiur, which we have. Shliach in a remote place doesn't have access to a Sofer. Noticed that in the Parshas Pinchos, so there we have Hineni noisin loyas Bris Shalom. So the word Shalom, as you can see on the screen, the Vov of the word Shalom is split. I remember it was a funny incident. It was I was in Australia in Yeshiva for 2 years. We had a youth minyan, and someone noticed, oh, there's a split letter, the word Shalom. So we took out another Sefer Torah, and so when the next Sefer Torah was also split. So and then we realized someone took a chumash. So it says on this Vov Ketio that this Vov is a split Vov. So he's asking the question that by him, the Sefer Torah, the Vov is written in a full Vov, and he doesn't have easy access to a Sofer to correct it. So what's the story? So what you have at the bottom is from the Sefer Meir Eine Sofrim, from Rav Karasik, who also wrote Pas Yisroel, numerous for him. So he writes the word Shalom. Yesh oimrim lasus vov zeiro. How do you do this change to the letter vov? Some say it should be a shorter vov. That's what it means. Vov ktio, a mini vov. Yesh oimrim lasus yud ktano. Some say no, it should be a yud and lomata mimeno kav koton, and then a small line going down beneath it. That's the second way. Yesh oimrim lasus vov zeiro, to make a small vov, and then yaniach mat cholok, a bit of space. I'm not sure what the difference is between this and the previous one. At any rate, if the vov is just a regular vov, it's not possible. You can read it. And Bechlal, if you remember in the Rambam Sefer Torah, he talks about all of these interesting changes, which are Mesoira, etc. He says they are a Mesoira, but there's not a reason to disqualify a Sefer because of them. Then he finishes off, you are allowed to erase it. In other words, erase that, make in the middle of the Vov, to erase it and make it into two. Although some would say it's got to do with hakodesh, sometimes the Sofer will tell you can't just fix it by erasing. Sometimes you have to rewrite it. So here's a chiddush that you can erase that little bit and it remains kosher. Since I'm already bringing up this, so what's this business of a split Vov? So I'm sure everyone's intrigued. Why is there a split Vov? I was also intrigued. So therefore, I looked up in the Baal HaTurim on the spot there in Parshas Pinchos. Dovar acher Vov K'tio. Ki Pinchos hu Elio. This is a promise to Pinchos. Pinchos is also another name, and also known as Elio. And we have 5 times in the Torah, 5 times Tanakh, Elio Hanovi is written without a Vov. Elio. Yaakov is written 5 times with a Vov. And Rashi mentions this in Chumash that the Eibishter took that Yaakov has taken the Vov from Eliyahu as a mashkin, as a security, that he will come with the Moshiach and redeem the Yidden. And there we have the pasuk, Yogil Yaakov Yismach Yisroel. Yaakov will rejoice, Yisrael will rejoice. Yismach is the same letters as Moshiach. She Yismach li Moisa Moshiach. Yisrael will rejoice. Yaakov will rejoice in the times of Moshiach. And then v'yachzer havov, then he will restore the Vov back to Eliyahu. And V'yiyah Eliyahu Shalom, there'll be the word Eliyahu will be the full name. And then he throws in that the word Shalom is Gematria Zeu Moshiach. So there you have a mention of Michal. There's a minhag of mentioning Eliyahu Hanovi in Motzei Shabbos. So here we've had a mention of Eliyahu Hanovi also. Fine. Long again. Vayetze. So here is another shliach also in quite a remote place. Before I go further. Someone Vov with a thin parallel line next to the regel. So this is another possibility of how you learn pshat in the Vav K'tio. So Rabbi Aryeh Freeman is sharing with us as to write a Vav with a thin parallel line next to the main foot of the Vav. Thank you. Okay. When people ask me Shilos and Sofris, I try to decline because it's a specialized field, and fine. So thank you, Rabbi Aryeh. Let's move on. So here's a shliach in a remote place, and there's no Jewish bakery. So as we are familiar, there's idea of lighting the fire, and in that way it should be Pas Yisroel. Can be lighting the fire, or can be adding, if the fire is already burning, to throw in a piece of wood to increase the heat. That's also called, makes it Pas Yisroel. It turns out that now this store, this bakery, sell partly baked loaves, which you'll take, they're frozen, and then you'll defrost them and bake them fully, and they're nice and fresh, etc. So this would be a much simpler solution than going every time to the bakery to light the fire every day. So is that an acceptable option? So the answer is yes. That would be called Pas Yisroel. I'm going to read here from Shulchan Aruch Yeridea, Siman Kuf Yud Beis. If a goy bakes bread without a yid stoking the fire, without the yid throwing a piece of wood into it, a splinter, even if it's become a bit crusty, moyil chitu Yisrael kol zman shehapas tzorich letanur. So long the fact that a yid will poke the fire, stoke the fire, is effective to make it Pas Yisroel, so long as the bread still has benefit from the oven. So it's very edible, but if it's going to be a little bit more enhanced by being in the oven another few minutes, and meanwhile a yid has intervened something, done something to the fire, that's also called Pas Yisroel. Then it goes further. Even if the bread has been taken out and it's edible already. If the bread is going to be put back in the oven and becomes more tasty, so then that's also called Pas Yisroel. So there's certainly what we're seeing here clearly, if it is not edible yet, because it's only partly baked, and a yid puts it into the oven at this stage, that would definitely be called Pas Yisroel. So yes, that would be acceptable. Okay, go on to the next question. Here is a Geman, is a Balkoire, and he is leining in 2 Shuls. And so it sometimes works out that the pressure of time till the Sefer Torah is put back, it's going to be late for the second slot. Can he leave the Shul before the Sefer Torah is returned to its place, to the Oron Kodesh? So I said I'd look it up. So here we have in Shulchan Aruch, that is in Siman Kuf Memtes, the dinim of Kriyas HaTorah. So it says the following: Ein hatzibur rashayim lotzes mibeis hakneses ad shiyatzniyo Sefer Torah. It's incorrect for the whole congregation to leave the shul until the Sefer Torah is put back in its place. Then the Ramo adds, Mihu im einon yotzin rak yochid les lambo. If it's only individual who's going out, that's not a problem. So therefore, there's definitely no problem for him to go out, especially if he's got an urgent mission to go to the lein in the other shul. Where we do have a business of everyone going out, let's say in Shulchan Aruch, that Rebbe brings it on, if there's a Bris on a Yom Kippur, possibly also in Rosh Hashanah, so then for the people to go out to do the Bris before Musaf, and the Sefer Torah are still left out, that would be an issue. So now someone's asking, can you buy a goyish loaf for 50 pence and put it in the oven for a few minutes to make it Pas Yisroel? And thank you for flashing back to this. First of all, obviously there's a very important point here. We're talking about that he has verified that the bread has got no treif fat in it and no milk in it, and it's and then don't use any treif fat for greasing the pans, etc. So that the kashrus side of it has been dealt with. We're only dealing with the issue of pas palter, of goyish bread, So according to what you're asking, by taking a loaf from the mechaber, you get the impression. Let's go back to the mechaber. You're saying that if you just pop it back into the oven and to warm it up, imhu mashbiach, it makes it nice and geschmack. Is that enough to make it Pas Yisroel? It's interesting pshat. Of course, I would say no, but there may be something to it. Actually, whilst I was reading this, I was thinking, what about making toast? But it's already completely edible, and so is it mashbiach? All right, that's like an interesting question. I mean, that would be a further amplification of your question, whether taking goyish bread and making it into toast, would that be called mashbiach and making it Pas Yisroel? Good question. I want to just share with you, derech agav, since we're talking about toast, there is a sefer called, I've forgotten the name of the sefer. His name was Rabbi Eliezer, and he was a Rov in Yerushalayim. I met him b'Seif Yamov, and he was a Rov during the mandate, the British mandate. And so he has a sefer. He's quoted Bashmir Shabbos I. It looks like they had a good relationship, and he used to visit the prisoners in the Jewish prisoners in the British prisons. And one of the things which they had was they would be given slices of bread. Could they take the slices of bread and use them for lechem mishnah? Could they use toast? Oh, thank you, Shali Tzion. Thank you. The Sefer Shali Tzion, obviously, that's got to do with Shali Tzion Shloim Asirayich. So he was a Rov of the Eden in the prisons, so he called it Sefer Shali Tzion. Thank you. So he deals with the question: could slices of toast be considered lechem mishnah? Which I think, obviously, in the circumstances, he is matir. Let's move on to a new shaila. Our shul has a new Bima. So what do we do with the old Bima? So does a Bima have a kedusha? So here we have now, this is Simon Kufnun Dalad in Shulchan Aruch. Tashmishe kedusha, kegoin tik shel sforim or mezuzis. The appurtenances, if that's the right word, of kedusha, of holiness, like the bag for the sforim, the container for mezuzahs, urutzuos tefillin, the straps for the tefillin. So the kedusha is the actual, like the parashas would be called the kedusha because you have Hashem's name mamish on it. And then the urutzuos, these are appurtenances to be able to use the tefillin. So they're called tashmishe kedusha. The argos shenoistin by Sefer Torah chumash, the chest, the cupboard, where you put Torah or chumash scrolls, perhaps he's talking about made of parchment. I'll call upon him. What's relevant to us is the kisei shenoistin olov Sefer Torah, the bench upon which the Sefer Torah is placed. I know we usually use the word kisei for a chair where we sit on, and here it's actually referring to the bima, what we call a bima. Actually, the word bima is referring to the platform where we stand on. So you've got a raised platform, and on top of it, you've got the shul, what we would call shulchan hakriya. So the word bima really is more the platform rather than the actual table. And this is referred to here as kisei. All right, so the Shulchan Aruch is saying that the kisei shenoiston olov Sefer Torah and the paroches, all of them have kedusha and v'tzorech legonzon. If they are no longer in use, they would have to be put in gnizim and put in shemus, or however you do that. So an Oron Kodesh, a disused Oron Kodesh, and in this case, a disused Bima, would have a kedusha. So that's the straightforward Didish Shulchan Aruch. The reason for this is, now you can ask, the Sefer Torah doesn't actually touch the wood of the Bima. So in what we've got here for a quote from Mishnah Berurah, I believe, even though the bima is covered with a cloth, nevertheless it's called a tashmish kedusha, because sometimes the Sefer Torah is placed directly on the table, on the wooden table, without the cloth. So then he quotes here from the Mishnah Berurah in Sharat Tzion that although nowadays we never read without a cloth under the Sefer Torah, however, sometimes it slips a bit. Now, then when you have the bottom of that first column, Achronis Maneinu, his schemu, contemporary authorities have come to the conclusion that pshit is that now ein motzi aflo leitim rechokis. It's absolutely not done at all. We'd never put a Sefer Torah directly onto the Bima, and as a result, it's called tashmish de tashmish, and that makes a very big difference to halacha, that it's considered two steps removed from the Sefer Torah, and therefore the bottom line in the second column, therefore you can use the Bima, which is now a surplus. You would be able to use it for mundane purposes, and similarly, it would not need to be put in geniza. It could be disposed of in a respectable way. It doesn't have to be put in geniza. So that remains the bottom line, that nowadays a Bima wouldn't have the status of Tashmish Kedusha and does not require geniza. And Oron Kodesh is a different story. There it would require. Okay, now here's a very interesting story. I was on the phone to someone called me up. It was 13 minutes past 2 p.m. and he calls me up that he has a Bris happening. It's somewhere in Eastern Europe, and it's 2 minutes before the Shkiyah, and it's an adult Bris, and therefore needs to use an anesthetic. The anesthetist is right there. It's 2 minutes before the Shkiyah. He wants to know how much grace does he have after Shkiyah to be able to do the Bris. And I told him up till 4 minutes after the Shkiyah, I would go along with it. In the Pohel, it was a little bit longer. Fine, that's a side issue. And I just throw in that on the one hand, I saw a quote from Rav Elyashiv that if a Bris was done in Bein Hashmoshes, then you'd have to do Hatofas Dan Bris. On the other hand, on the margin of the Shulchan Aruch, they quote from Rabbi Yaakov Emden that if there was a child who had on the 8th day, and now it's delayed until Ben Hashmoshes, so he says, do the Bris Ben Hashmoshes rather than delaying it. It should be a Bris Shalei Bismanai. So there seems to be a bit of a difference about that. Be that as it may. So we had this discussion about how long after the Shkiyah do you have leeway? Now, perhaps I will tell you why I felt there is a bit of leeway. The time for sunset, which is advertised in the calendars, that is based upon astronomical Shkiyah, astronomical sunset, which means that as the sunset, which is going to be published in the newspapers, etc. There's a letter of the Rebbe to the late Rabbi Hillel Azimov. Those who learned in Brenoir may remember Rabbi Hillel Azimov used to sometimes visit. He was involved in the running and the administration of the yeshiva, although he lived in Paris. So he would publish the calendar. The yeshiva Brenoir used to produce a calendar every year. And there's a letter to him from the Rebbe about using the astronomical Shkiyah. Now here it becomes you have to be very, very precise. When we say the sun has set, that means you're looking at the horizon to the west and the sun has disappeared. But where is your lens? Where are you looking? So the astronomical Shkiyah is that the lens is also on sea level, as if you're wearing swimming trunks or a scuba diver, whatever, and you're in the water and you put your eyes mamish on sea level and you see, and then the sun disappears. That's called astronomical Shkiyah. Now, someone might start picking details. Does it mean the full sun or the middle of the sun? Okay. At any rate, so the astronomical Shkiyah, the observer, is at sea level. Obviously, if you're standing a little bit higher on the promenade, so then you will see the sun another couple of minutes later. And therefore, this difference between astronomical Shkiyah, which is the observer is at sea level, and the Halocho Shkiyah, which is not assuming that fellows gone swimming, just to, at Shkiyah time. Therefore, we can allow another couple of minutes. And then in addition, you have the Alter Rebbe uses another equation of Tarhorim Magvoyim Sheberet Yisroel, from a height of about 700 meters, etc. How long from that point would the sun still be visible? So that gives us at least 4 minutes, perhaps a little bit more, to say it's still considered day. At any rate, I finished this conversation with this Mohel, with this shliach, and then the phone call. I get another phone call, and this is from someone who's a regular shaila, but he happens to be a Mohel. So I say to him, I had a very interesting shaila about a Bris, Ben Ashmoshes. So he says to me that I had an interesting situation a few years ago. I did a bris for a family, little boy, and the bris was done on Shabbos. Fine. 2 years later, the next baby was born, the next baby boy. Now, there is a brought in poskim that you don't switch moyalim from one child to the next unless you've got a very good reason for doing so. Similar to the concept of makire kahuna, that you don't switch from one coin to the other. I see this coin smiling. So similarly, you have the idea of one mohel, you don't switch to another unless there's a reason for it. So, all right, probably also did a good job the first time. They called him again. For the second bris, they tell him, by the way, the first baby was born by Caesarian. So then so now Caesarian section is not to be done on Shabbos. A bris for Caesarian birth is not done on Shabbos. So he says, but I checked out that the bris is a valid bris. So I said to him, yeah, the bris is a valid bris, but possibly you have a ma'aser v'chilul Shabbos, that you did a bris on Shabbos, which you weren't allowed to. So let's discuss this a little bit. First of all, we have here in Shulchan Aruch, this is from Hilchos Mila, that Reish Simon Reish Samach Vav, that Vayetze doifen, that's the word in Halocho, that the baby came out of the wall rather of the womb rather than in the normal, the natural way. So it says that bris is not derech Shabbos. The basis for this is, it says in the Parshas Tazria, Isha kisasria v'yolda zocha v'tomo shivas yamim. And then it says, Avayem Hashmini yimel b'sar arlose. So when a woman gives birth, so the Torah says she becomes tameya. And then the Torah says, and the baby is born, so on the 8th day should be the bris, and be saying, Avayem Hashmini afilu b'Shabbos. But if the baby is born by Caesarian, so then the woman doesn't become tameya later because it wasn't born in the natural way. So then that bris is not derech Shabbos. This is a machlokas in Gemara, and machlokas even in Rishonim, but the halacha remains, we don't do a Caesarian bris on Shabbos. So now becomes a question, he did a bris on Shabbos, the bris is a valid bris, but what does he do about the union of chilul Shabbos? He did a malacha on Shabbos, which he wasn't licensed to do so. So the term which we have in halacha for this is to bidvar mitzvah ve'oso mitzvah. He got confused and he was engaged with the mitzvah, also mitzvah, and he actually performed a mitzvah, although he wasn't licensed to do so. So then there's a whole discussion here. So now we have a Mishnah in Shabbos. There's a Perek in Shabbos called Perek Rabbi de Mila, about Daf Kuf Lamed Zayin, and we have the following story. There are two baby boys. One is for a Sunday, and one was born on Sunday, therefore the bris will be done on Sunday. And the other one was born on Shabbos, so the bris will be done on Shabbos. And the Mohel got confused, and he did the Sunday bris on Shabbos. So then is chayiv. What does it mean chayiv? A person violates Shabbos in error, that's called b'shoigeg. So then he has to bring a korban chatos. So when it says chayiv, the Parshas, it means a korban chatos. We realized afterwards did the wrong things, so have to bring a korban chatos. What if one child is a Friday baby and one is a Shabbos baby? So then it has here that Rebbe Lezer says his chayiv, he did the Friday baby on Shabbos. So Rebbe Lezer says his chayiv. And Rebbe Shua says his potter. So if you read this, you can understand that Rebbe Lezer says, Tor bidvar mitzvah, Also mitzvah. So the first one, when it was a Sunday baby and did a bris on Shabbos, is Torah b'dvar mitzvah v'lo also mitzvah. He didn't make a mitzvah. He didn't do a mitzvah because it's a premature, for the mitzvah. But if it's a Friday baby, so then Rabbi Shua says Torah b'dvar mitzvah also mitzvah is potter. Rabbi Lezer says Torah b'dvar mitzvah is chayav chatos. That's how you see here. It seems to be a machalikas tanoim. So. Here, I'll confess, I thought I'd find something in Poskim. I couldn't find anywhere, so I mamish had to go straight to the Gemara and work my way through. I found perhaps some remote mention, but I saw in one Sefer, he says that for sure the Mohel needs to have a kapara. The shaila was with the sandik, where he's considered accomplice to the malacha. Therefore, does the sandik have to also have a kapara? Well, let's leave that alone. So, all right. So we have here this question of this, and this was my precedent in the Gemara. Then he made a bris on Shabbos without proper license to do so. One says it's chai, one says pater. This is brought down in Rambam. It's not brought down in Gemara. I'm sorry, it's not brought down in Shulchan Aruch because it's not relevant lemaisa. But it's brought down it's brought down in Rambam, and I'm going to show you. Now, we'll come back to the Rambam in a moment, but why it is negei lahalacha. Because we have a whole discussion in Shulchan Aruch, if a person violated Shabbos, b'shoigig. And it has a whole thing of doing a kapara, of a whole procedure for kapara, which we'll come back to. And similarly, you have in Holichas Nida a similar thing. If a person violated those halachas, b'shoigig, so there's a seder of a kapara. All right, so now we're looking at the Rambam. In the Hilchos Shkogis in Karbonis, and he says if a person does a mitzvah and he didn't have an avera at the same time, and such an avera which is a sin which warrants a carbon, which is a carbon chatos, so it's his potter. Also birshus, because when he was doing this, he had kind of license to do what he's doing. Although there was a confusion, so he goes into an example of a boal yevimtoi. We'll skip that. V'chein, the second line highlighted area. V'chein mishahoyu l'shtei tinokus. It's got two baby boys. One is the Bris, is a Shabbos, and one is a Friday or a Sunday. So the Rambam changes because in the Mishnah, if you saw, he has a difference whether the second baby is a Friday or it's a Sunday. Here the Rambam puts them together. Whether the second baby is a Friday baby or a Sunday baby, if he did both bris on Shabbos, he did both these two babies, so then he is potter. Why? Because there is a legitimate, he as a Mohel today has a bris to be done today. The thing is, he did the other one also, but he had permission to do the Shabbos baby today. He also did another one, but he had a license to be doing a bris today. So the fact he did two today in error, he does not have to bring a korban chatos. But then the Rambam adds, if neither of them, let's say one was a Friday baby, one's a Sunday baby, and he forgot and he made the bris on Shabbos, then he says it is chayv chatos. So the Rambam is saying that your exemption, the exemption which is discussed in the Mishnah, is only because there is a Shabbos baby. So there is license to do the Shabbos baby. So therefore, you are acquitted for what you did in the Sunday baby or the Friday baby. Coming back to our case, there is no Shabbos baby. There is just a one baby who is a Yotze Dofen. And there was no license to do so, to do the bris on Shabbos. So he did not have license to do any bris on Shabbos in these immediate circumstance, and therefore we come back. It seems to be chayv chatos. Now, just to spell this out a little bit clearer, the Rambam gives another couple of examples. One example, he says, if a person carries a lulav on Shabbos, he'd be potter because he's osik b'dvar mitzvah, and Torah b'dvar mitzvah also mitzvah would be potter. He needs to use a lulav. He shouldn't have carried it through the street, but he'd be potter. Then he says, if a person shechted a korban pesach, after he shechted, then he found out that the owner for whom he was who was doing it for, they had withdrawn, so he had no license to do this Korban Pesach, or the owner had died, or they had become mutame, whatever reason. He was acting on behalf of the owner of this sheep, and he was shechting it on Shabbos, which is Erev Pesach, and it turns out he wasn't licensed to do so. Or if it was found to be a treifa in the lungs, let's say, so then it's potter, because what he did with license. But the Rambam says, if he found out, if after the shechita they saw there was a visible blemish, a visible mum, or a visible treifa, so then chayav chatos mipnei shehoyo lo livdoik v'achar yishchot. He should have verified, and because he didn't, then it's chayav chatos. So unfortunately, that seems to be my conclusion over here, that because he himself is frustrated, why didn't I ask whether it was a Caesarian? But he could have asked this question, should have asked this question. So it's an error, but all right. So then it's a chayav chatos. I just wanted to lighten the atmosphere a bit. There was a story with the late Rav Padver, and it's a Friday night, and a woman saw her husband. She looked like he wasn't looking very well, and she was worried he was having a heart attack. So she called up Hatzalah, and they came running, and the husband sees this new person come in. Oh, it's Shabbos. Very nice of you to come. Actually, I can serve you a glass of tea. It turns out it was a false alarm. And so the Hatzalah member, he was very upset because he'd gotten into his car racing around, and it was a false alarm. So he came to Rav Padver and he asked for a tikkun for him. So Rav Padver, in his style, said, "Kim an Erev Yom Kippur, in the Zugen al Chait, you should not, don't do tshuva for this. For this one, you did it with license, and you shouldn't do tshuva for it." Okay, fine. Let's come back to our topic, though. So now, this is here, and this I'm sharing this. I can say for myself, sometimes on Shabbos you forget. You switch on a light by mistake. You forget out of how do you say, reflex almost. And what do you do there now? You Michal Shabbos, and then what do you do now? Is it just I'm sorry, or is there something more how do you say more put together, a whole program of kapara? So now here's a story about a fire, and I want to address this also. I've been a couple of times at a family simcha, and there were many more candles than there were people, because everyone was lighting, all their Baruch Hashem for big mishpachas, and because there were so many candles, the curtain caught fire, this caught fire, and someone put out the fire. Now, it wasn't a pikuach nefesh, I don't think. It was okay. It could have been, but it was like people out of panic put out a fire. If you put out a fire on Shabbos and it wasn't pikuach nefesh, that's a serious consequence. And I'm today saying this now because this comes up, and I tell people, when you're traveling, you don't have to light all 13 candles. You can light just 2 candles is enough. That may not always solve the problem, but having many candles in a small space without adequate forethought is actually asking for trouble. So let's come back to our topic. So now, if someone put out a fire on Shabbos, if it was not to save a life, it was just to save property. So also l'chal Shabbos, you're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos, even though it's a melacha shein sichel gufo. You don't have any benefit from put out candles. And he says, even if it's Isur Rabbanon, like Isur Tchumen, you're not allowed to be mechal Shabbos to save money. Then he says, if a person was mechal Shabbos, so then he says he needs to have a kapara, and that is he should fast 40 days. The 40 days do not have to be consecutive; they can be a Monday and a Thursday. And these fasts should also be added that the following evening, not to have meat, not to have wine the night after the Tans, in addition to the 40 fasts, and also to give a 18 pshutim, which is for tzedakah instead of a korban chatas. Because that's the shiur of a seller. Now, if you want to know how much is this, so Koyanim will tell you, we work out 5 sloim, we work out at about 100 grams. So 20 Yudches Pshutim would be about 20 grams of silver, which what I checked today would be, it's about 6 pounds or something for 10 grams. So 20 grams would be about 13 pounds for Bimkoy Makor Buchatas. Then he goes in, if a person's not able, for whatever reason, not able to fast, so he wants to redeem the fasts. So then we have the Yud-based Pshutim im Erev Shabbos. Now the Yud-based Pshutim is what the Alter Rebbe mentions in Tanya, Chai G'doyle Polish or Groschen Polish, which works out. When I've once worked this through, it works out to be about 11 grams of silver, which would be, according to the current price, would be a 6 pounds and 68 pence for each day of which he wants to be paid. So there is a whole regime here for a person who is chayav chatos. Although you could, and now I'm looking at it again, I'm not sure, because here the person put out the fire knowingly. It's not necessarily a shogeg. That would make it more serious. But then, so then perhaps the fast wouldn't apply, but certainly the korban chatas would apply. So at least to give tzedakah b'mkayim korban chatas. So I'm a little bit unsure now as I'm speaking. Right, let's move on. Now, someone writes to me, he sees that Minyonim is one of our regular listeners. He listens to the recording. He asked to address the inyan of davening Mincha after Shkiyah. So someone's asking, just before we go on to this shaila, is one chayav to be choishish that the birth was a Caesarian? Listen, if you're Mohel and you're speaking to the mother, and you know it's quite a personal, how do you say? Word intrusion might not be the right word, but with my father, Shalom, I used to go often with Bris, and you'd go into a bedroom. It's quite a personal, how do you say, a conversation. So it's yes, you should be asking. If it's a Shabbos Bris, if it's meant to be a Shabbos, you should ask the question whether it's a Caesarian. Definitely, you should be asking that question. Yeah. Right now. So coming back to Mincha after sunset. So Bichlal in Chabad, we are mishtadel to daven Mincha before sunset, as it is in Shulchan Aruch. Unlike many Polish circles, where they tend to daven quite late, which we had a couple of weeks ago. I think we had with the story with the Alter Rebbe, with the Barditcheva. And by the time the Barditchev was davening Mincha, by the Alter Rebbe, it's already time for Ma'ariv. They're going to Rabbeinu Tams, whatever it may be. They're obviously the Polish are quite easygoing about this davening Mincha late, but in Chabad we do Chatchila daven Mincha before the Shkiyah, before sunset. In the Alter Rebbe's whole treatise on Hachnosas Shabbos, on the Zman of Shabbos, he says, although he's very machmir, that not to do lighting candles after Shkiyah, etc. By contrast, when it comes to Mincha, which is a mitzvah of davening Mincha is midrabanon, one needn't be moiche b'yada mekilin. One needn't be moiche those who are taking the lenient path to daven Mincha late, whether in a weekday or on Shabbos. Now, when he says on Shabbos, he doesn't mean Shabbos afternoon. I don't think so. Because why should there be a difference between Shabbos afternoon and Tuesday afternoon? He means Shabbos as in Friday evening. That the people who daven Mincha late on Friday evening or needn't be moicha. And I'll explain the issue with that in a moment. He says, especially in the winter, the days are short, and we find that like you're allowed to do a shvus with divrei sofrim. I had I'm sharing this 3 weeks ago. I went to Shul on Friday afternoon before Shabbos, and whilst I was out at Shul, a woman knocked on the door at home. And what had happened, she was caring for her baby, and it came, and she was preoccupied with caring for the baby. She didn't manage to light candles in time. So this was a little bit after Shabbos had ended, and she asked, "What can she do now?" So the answer for that would be, you're allowed to call in a goy. If it's ben hashmoshes, Amir al-Nochri is okay, the tzarech mitzvah. So she would be allowed to call in the goy off the street to light her candles, with a broch, without a broch at any rate. But she would be able to call a goy because ben hashmoshes you're allowed to call him. If the Rabbana would be allowed ben hashmoshes, v'shas atchak, tzarech mitzvah. Coming back to our thing about Sedav Mincha, the Alter Rebbe says can't be worse than an Isser Shvus Midrabana. Where the Shmir Shabbos Kilchosa, he has an issue with this, and he says there's a mitzvah called Tosfos Shabbos that you should add to the Shabbos. Now, if you daven mincha, that means you are declaring it's not Shabbos yet, and so you kind of defying the mitzvah of Tosfos Shabbos. That's his problem. I'm going to take this a little bit further. What is the halacha for a single man who's benching licht? Can he daven mincha after he benches licht? And the issue here is, when a woman lights candles, so it's Kabbalas Shabbos. By default, a woman's Kabbalas Shabbos when she lights candles. By a man, there isn't that default. So he's not Kabbalas Shabbos by the lighting of candles. So now, is his davening mincha afterwards going to be a contradiction? He said he's ready to be Mekabel Shabbos. Yeah. If he was Mekabel Shabbos. So this question was actually addressed by the Koshik Lovarov in Eretz Tzvi. He was asked by the Gerer Rebbe at the time, and I don't remember which one it was, Imre Emes perhaps. He was asked this question, and he deals with this question. And my take on this is the following. There is a lashon trei koli desasri, take koli desasri. Now you can read that word, that term, two ways. Trei koli desasri, two leniencies, or trei koli desasri, two contradicting voices. And that's what I'm going to take that view. Once you've said I'm Mekabel Shabbos, if you articulated the B'dibur, then you cannot afterwards daven mincha, because it's trei koli desasri, two contradicting voices. But so long as you haven't been Mekabel Shabbos B'dibur, then you are able to daven mincha. It's not considered trei koli desasri, although you're Mekabel Shabbos. As long as you're Mekabel Shabbos b'machshava, not B'dibur, then you would be able to go on and daven mincha. Let's move on. So someone asks the following question, that they use oils at home for aromatherapy, and one of the ways is to put a few drops of oil into water, which is in a diffuser, and that creates a vapor. And now the oils are real extracts from plants and herbs, and it's a nice fragrance. Does one make a brocha when they turn on the diffuser and smell the vapor? So I'm going to confess, I looked for this. I couldn't find this question addressed clearly in Malachim, etc. So I'll say the one my take on this is, and Sofer brochas lehakel. So here we have the following: Reach toiv she'ein lo ikel. If you have a good fragrance, which does not have a real base, kagoyin begodim hamugmorim. So if you have a garment which had been impregnated with a fragrance, but the fragrance is not, it's not that the garment has a smell, the garment has absorbed the smell. So that's called the reach she'ein lo ikel. So there are those who say you don't make a brocha on such a reach. This is, by the way, the reason why the poskim say not to make a brocha on a perfume. well, maybe other reasons also, but because the perfume is not an intrinsic fragrance, it's got other fragrances which are kind of implanted into it. And so one should avoid smelling this consciously because of the shaila whether you should be making a bracha or not. Then he has if you have a Mohel box which was used for storing besomim, and so it's picked up the fragrance, and you open the box and you smell it, that's for sure is considered reach she'ein lo ikir. And the reason is, why is that different to the garment where it's a bit of a sofer? Because you don't put the besomim in the box that the box should absorb the fragrance. With the begodim, with the garments, it was done consciously. And therefore, so coming back to our question about the aromatherapy, I'm a bit concerned whether, since you're not smelling the actual oil, it's coming through water or something, it may be in the gather of reich she'ein lo ikir, and therefore, at least misofik, I would say sofik brachas lahakol. Someone's asking two questions. One question is, can the forbidden haben? One needs to ask this question. Yeah, you might lose a few bob through it, but yeah. It turns out it's a pidyon. If it's a what do you call it? If it's a yetzer doifen, then there's no pidyon haben. Can a woman daven mincha after candle lighting? The pashtus from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is that she should not be davening mincha after the candle lighting. There are achronim who do condone it, but the way the Alter Rebbe presents it, one shouldn't, and therefore I understand it's a pressured time, but that's the. So to say that you should daven mincha before you bench licht, many women will say that there's no way they can get round to it. So fine. So we'll daven ma'ariv instead. Right. So now let's come back. So someone's asked me a question about the three words added in the Shema. So this is written hayom yom. It's Yudzayin Iyar. It says in Krishma, which we say in the morning before davening, sheyesh omrim b'boker. Some say it in the morning. What that means is some people daven early, and therefore they're davening early, they're before the Zman. But some people are davening later, and therefore, in order not to miss out on the mitzvah deraisa of saying Krishma Bismano, so they say Krishma earlier. What is known in Lubavitch is called Krishma Ktano. So, yeah, to be fulfilled the mitzvah of Krishma at the right time. So for that Shema, one also repeats the three words Ani Hashem Elokeichem. And one also adds the word emes. Two things. Repeat the three words Ani Hashem Elokeichem and add the word emes. In the Krishma said in Tefillin Rabbeinu Tam and Shimush Rabo, I guess present company excluded. So one doesn't repeat the three words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, but one does add the word emes. So the person's asking, why is there this distinction? So there is this idea of the Shema having 245 words, mentioned the Zohar, and another three words makes it in 248. Is Gmati Roimach, which is like a spear, which is a form of protection for your Ramach Yevorim. So fine, so there is a concept of 248 words. Why is it not done in Rabbeinu Tam? So just a little bit of so this on the bottom there's a Sefer Hayom Yom HaMavur. So he says a svara, you can take it. He says Krishma and Tefillin Rabbeinu, we don't repeat those three words because the saying of the Shema is not a chiyuv min hadin, and it's not even a shmira by night for Krishma shalamito. So we do repeat the words Ani Hashem Elokeichem, because there you say the whole Shema in order to have a protection for your Ramach Yevorim. But the Shema Rabbeinu Tam is not to be yotze the mitzvah of Shema, and it's not for Shmira, and therefore you don't have to repeat the three words. On the other hand, you do say the word emes, although it's not, as Rabbi Moshe Katzenelman used to say, Moshe Rabbeinu nicht gesagt emes. Pasuk says in the Gemara, Moshe didn't say the word emes. We add the word emes because of the Pasuk, Hashem Elokim emes, hu Elokim chayim. All right, so we do add the word emes, but we don't repeat in Rabbeinu Tam the three words because it's not as a man hachiyuv of Shema. We'll go on to the next point. Someone's asking, is it preferable for the woman to skip davening mincha if she doesn't manage to do so before Halocho? Absolutely. Hadlokas Neiris is a mitzvah and you can't delay that. And so if it's a choice between benching licht and davening mincha, she's going to have to rely on the fact that many women nowadays don't daven mincha on a regular basis. And what can we do? Right. You're asking, aren't the three words a chatzi posuk? All right, good question. We'll leave it for another time because I don't have an answer. Right, let's go on to the next question. Now, since this has got to do with Ramach Evorim, and now the Ramach Evorim, if you wanted to know the detail, so it's a Mishnah in Orlus, and he talks about, goes into detail all the limbs of a person. What that means, a limb by definition means a bone and flesh and sinew, boso, gidim, whatever about zombies. So it says, for example, in your hand, you've got 30 evorim. That's how the Mishnah lists. So in each finger, there's 5 pieces to each finger. There's 3 in the finger, but then inside the hand, there's another 2. So it's shloshim bepisas hayad, and it goes through the whole body, and same thing in the feet. Each foot is 30 evorim, and the Mishnah goes into whole detail, and the number of 248. But there the Mishnah also says that a woman has got, one says Reish Nun Aleph and one says Reish Nun Beis. And so that's together the Reish Nun Beis of the woman and the Reish Mem Ches of a man equals 500. And that's twice the Neir. So you have 2 Neiris for Shabbos, one for the man, one for the woman, because also the man has got 248, she has 252 together, it's 500. So that's a side issue. But meanwhile, the question is, should a woman be saying, repeating the 3 words? If she's saying Shema, should she repeat in order to have the number of 248? So this question was addressed by the Mincha in Sefer Minchas Elazar. And so he says, this is from the quotes from the Arizal, idea of 248 words in the Shema. And he says that the woman does say Shema, she's not chayav to, but if she does say Shema, so he says the Ramach Evorim means Ramach Evorim in their spiritual world, the Ramach Lemailo of Zoh. And since we're not talking about the tikkun of your own Ramach Evorim of in spheres, etc., therefore he says a woman should also say repeat those 3 words, Kishim Shalamito, whenever she's when she's saying Shema. Finally, we have a last question. Someone asked me the question. It's a very dova haposhut, but it's worth addressing. If a person asks a question, then we should give it the attention. He has a child, he has a daughter called Tzivya, and now he wants to give a Bez Hashem a Bris. He wants to give the name Tzvi. So Tzivya, or perhaps it really should be pronounced Tzviya, I don't know. So it's the same word for a male or a female. Is there an issue of having siblings with the same name? So I told him it's not a problem. You have martial people called Nochum and Nechama, which it's the same name. And but then I did do a little bit more homework. And so here we have this is a Pischei Tshuva in Siman Kuf Tezayin. Now, what's Siman Kuf Tezayin? That's the postcode about the Minyonim of Sakona. So in the Pischei Tshuva, top line over here, V'ayim b'tshuas adnei poz, which I tried to find, I didn't manage to. He says that you can give 2 children, 2 sons, the same name, whether one child had passed away, or even if both of them are alive. That would be very confusing, but fine. And then v'shom b'hashmot is kosa. There's a concern of Ein Hara. But otherwise, he says, if one child was given this name and he passed away, then you wouldn't give the same name to another child because of concern of if it was not a good mazel for the first child, didn't survive, one wouldn't give that name to another child. So there is this idea which is saying one wouldn't give the same name to 2 siblings, but that's mamish the same name. But if it's in the case which he's asking, Tzvi and Tzivya, etc., there shouldn't be any hesitation, and that would be okay. Just to finish off, someone had asked me, we have another couple of minutes, and so I'll share with you the following. Someone asked me on Thursday night about opening a can of soda water. And it's on Erev Shabbos is a big problem. If you only open the can before Shabbos, so the bubbles will escape. So you will have lacking in Erev Shabbos flat soda water. So are you allowed to open cans? So very briefly, though, there is a sugin Gemara in Shabbos about shover adam chovis, about breaking open a barrel. And the way it's brought Halocho, I think it's in Mashin Yodalad, that Toysos says that this is a barrel which was an earthen barrel. It was broken and then it was stuck together. That's the term is mustaki. So a mustaki is a kind of container which was cracked and repaired with some glue, and so now it's a poor quality barrel, and that is the type of barrel that you're allowed to break on Shabbos to take out food, etc. But to break a healthy barrel wouldn't be allowed, because it's like making a barrel is boine, so demolishing a barrel is sofer, so you're not allowed to demolish a barrel. So now in this mustaki, there's a question: what is the leniency about the mustaki? Is it because it is not choshev, or because it is not strong? Is it a subjective? Is its disadvantage, so to speak? Is it a subjective disadvantage or objective? So here is different views in poskim. Some say that it's because you're throwing it away, it's not choshev for you. Some say no, because it's a broken thing which has been glued together. It's a weak barrel. The nafkamina is with a tin can. A tin can is disposable, and therefore objectively, subjectively it is a throwaway thing, has no chashivas. Objectively it is strong, and this is where you have different opinions whether you could open a can on Shabbos. Going back to the Tehillah David, who lived about 100 something years ago, Rov of Anash, and then Shimon Dvorkin, also he took the view that you're not allowed to open cans on Shabbos. Many disagree, and they say that you are allowed to open cans on Shabbos because it's a throwaway. Rabbi Heller, as I was gesund, he took the stricter view, and that's, if we have people ask me, I say you cannot open a can on Shabbos, only al yidei nochri. But there are many who are lenient. Now there's another issue here, where the Mishnah says, you're allowed to break open a barrel, but you shouldn't make a neat opening. So when you've got these pull-ring cans, so they're made in a way that you can drink from it, and they shouldn't cut your lips. So it's a mitzvah. Now, there's a difference. If you're breaking open the can, and you're not drinking from the can, so even according to the lenient view, I'm saying, even if you say that you are allowed to break open a can, it's a mustaki, but you wouldn't be allowed to break it and drink from it, because then you mechav and lasses loper, you want to make it a neat opening that you should be able to drink from it. If you're pulling the ring and then pouring out into another container or using a straw, so then you could say you're not mechav and lasses loper. Then according to the other view, you would be allowed to open a can on Shabbos. According to the stricter view, you can only open a can through you get a nochri to open it for you, and then you would be able to enjoy your Erev Shabbos and your fresh, bubbly soda water. I wish you a good Woche and seid alle gesund.